Yup, that's us. You're probably wondering how we got into this situation.
A long time ago, approximately 4.6 billion years ago, the solar system was a cloud of gas and dust known as a solar nebula. Gravity eventually drew these materials together, which began to spin rapidly, forming the sun. The remaining materials began clumping together. Lighter particles were swept away by solar winds, leaving behind heavy, rocky materials, which ended up forming planets such as Mercury, Venus, Mars, and our very own Earth. Solar winds had less impact on lighter elements that were further away, which resulted in the formation of gas giants.
Earth formed when dense and heavy materials combined together. The Earth's core was the first to form as heavy materials sank into the center. Lighter materials resulted in the crust, which is the Earth's outermost layer. Gravity also drew together the gases that formed the Earth's atmosphere. When the Earth was still very young, a Mars-sized object collided with it, which catapulted chunks of the Earth into outer space. These chunks eventually drew together over time, resulting in the formation of our moon, which is responsible for the tides on Earth.
The early solar system was a very violent and rather chaotic place. Earth was being repeatedly bombarded with asteroids and other celestial bodies. These asteroids most likely contained ice which evaporated into Earth's atmosphere, eventually resulting in clouds. This is due to the fact that the Earth, in its early days, had a molten surface due to its many collisions. As the Earth cooled down to a suitable temperature, the ice, which has been stored in clouds, was released in the form of rain, which brought severe flooding and was believed to have formed the Earth's seas and oceans. Because our planet is in the Goldilocks zone, or the habitable zone, the liquid water was able to remain on the surface without evaporating or freezing.
The first cells developed millions of years ago, and it's believed that they first developed in tide pools, which are shallow pools of seawater on rocky shores. Amino acids, lipids, and proteins were mixed around in the pools until the first cells developed. The food source of these cells were the same proteins, lipids, and amino acids found in the water. These cells could not use oxygen, however, they could release it into the atmosphere, which is actually what made the atmosphere suitable for breathing. Over time, these cells developed the ability to use oxygen, which allowed them to perform more bodily functions, which created more complex organisms. Eventually, multicellular organisms were formed. These were organisms that were not limited to one cell. It could be made from 10 cells or even billions. As cells became more complex, more and more life forms began emerging.
The Avalon Explosion occurred 575 million years ago. In the Avalon Explosion, a lot of new animals and organisms evolved in a short amount of time. Some of the organisms that were found in the Avalon Explosion are called rangemorphs and tribichidium. Rangemorphs looked like leaves on a stem, and tribichidium looked like Beyblades.
Living organisms have descended with characteristics from species that lived before them. Darwin's theory talks about natural selection and the survival of the fittest, better adapted organisms. Species whose individuals are best adapted to the local conditions are more likely to survive and reproduce, thereby passing on copies of their genes to the next generation. Given enough time, natural selection can create entirely new species. Based on this theory, Darwin concluded that all humans have evolved from apes. Darwin developed the theory of evolution before scientists knew about DNA.
So now we're in the 21st century, and the complexities of the universe have brought questions like, how did life really begin? Which goes first, the milk or the cereal? Is water wet? Or if you're waiting on the waiter, do you become the waiter?